culture pastor.
And so I was just thinking that if the goal is to save lives, the bikinis that the Baywatch girls wear, that's not conducive to running fast and doing active things and saving lives. Like, why are they wearing those?
I mean, it probably woke a lot of people up.
That would be the honest answer.
Hasselhoff gets to run around in the shorts and like the jacket, which is weird. But yet the girls are out there in like, one-piece bikinis, basically. And I'm just like, that's not fair.
Although that is the typical lifeguard uniform. Like even at our public pool.
The one piece?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but our pool, look, it's a lot different than California.
Yeah.
And it could be cool. I mean, David Hasselhoff gets a jacket. Could be cold in some of those days.
But
the
you
wind
ladies, no
off
jackets
the
for
ocean.
you.
And poor Yasmin Bleeth. No one cares about her comfort.
Maybe she didn't like the jackets. And
Maybe that's why she got on drugs. No one ever thinks about that, but I do. Poor Yasmin. Wonder whatever happened to her. She had to go to rehab, right?
I hope so after you said.
Also, I have trouble discriminating between characters and the actresses who play the characters. But Yasmin did have some sort of problem that I don't remember the outcome of. But not Pamela. Pamela just, is loved.
She never had any issues.
Yeah, is loved by Borat and Tommy Lee from Motley Crue. And anyways, David Hasselhoff's loved by Germans.
All the Germans.
He's a big deal.
He tore down the Berlin Wall.
Pretty much single-handedly, as
Yes.
I'm told.
This is a true story.
David Hasselhoff ended communism, fascism, and everything else.
In Europe. He didn't go to Asia.
Every time I'm in a bad situation, I think, what would David Hasselhoff do?
He also went to space and saved us from a Sharknado.
Fact.
Talk about not being able to delineate from reality and entertainment. Sharknado was pretty much a documentary.
Yes. Which,
Wow.
I'm not going to lie, I truly miss that franchise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was so cheesy and campy, and they knew it. And they just were like, you know what would be awesome? Is if this Sharknado went into space. Mm-hmm. And we had the Hoff stop it.
Add a kid, Hoff. So this is Pop Culture Pastor, our podcast here. Usually it's just me and Cody, but for the news segment, we also have BJ, who is also a pastor.
I am, yeah. First time on here.
3 pastors. BJ Wall, welcome to the
thanks.
Geeks of the Round Table.
Yeah. I'm probably the worst person to be on here, but I'm glad to be here. So,
BJ's not big into pop culture. He's just going to be a third guy here.
yeah, you'll just hear me laugh a few times.
He's a voice.
That's it. And I'll laugh because I don't know what's happening.
Well, okay, our news segment will play into your hands this week, though, because we have simple news to talk about. Just a few stories, because a couple of them might be longer, deal with real world issues, unfortunately. The first one doesn't. I just wanted to talk about Leonardo DiCaprio
I've heard of him.
going to Coachella with his girlfriend, Camilla Moroni. He's 47. She's 24. I don't think we don't really have to talk about that if we don't want to. I will say, I find it weird that everybody was, bombing on that pastor. Of course, he was 63 and the girl was 18, but
Oh, I know what you're talking
yeah.
about. That waited till she was 18 and then took a picture of it and like celebrated.
Yeah. That's bad news all the way around. But how come Leo gets a pass?
Well, they did make fun of it at the Oscars, but they asked him for his approval to make fun of that at the
did they?
Oscars. Mm-hmm.
And
That's
he
probably
did
smart.
not slap anybody.
He did not.
They did not do that for Will.
Nobody asked him. I don't think. Pretty sure nobody asked him if they could make a alopecia joke. 47 years old. Okay, but that's not what I want to talk about. Leo showed up, trying to conceal his identity. He's wearing his hat real low.
He does that.
And he was wearing a Kansas City Royals hat, which clearly means the Royals are winning in the World Series this year.
They got to 500 last night.
There's a rule.
As this is aired.
If Leo is wearing your hat and he's not from Kansas City, then we're probably going to win the World Series. That's a real thing.
Fact.
Yeah. What's it like? What do you think it's like to be Leo DiCaprio? I don't often think of him, but he's older than me. He's 2 years older than me. He's 47 years old, and this dude has a 24-year-old girlfriend, and he's still going to Coachella.
He just has too much time on his hands.
Do you think it's because, like, when you make movies, when you're a movie star, you have that, like, 3 months where you're indisposed, right? Mm-hmm. You're working on the set every day, but then you have these long swaths of time where you just like, time on my hands.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm going with.
What a wild life. What a wild life.
Yeah.
Do you think Leo ever gets married?
No.
Or maybe a couple of times.
Like, look,
it's either no or a couple of times.
Because this is my first thought. If me at 45, I'm not even as old as Leo, and let's say something happened to my wife, the thought of having a 24-year-old girlfriend sounds like hell.
Sounds exhausting.
It sounds like, no thanks. I'll just be alone.
But he does have this parameter of age range he likes to date.
Oh, this is a tradition with Leo. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want to grow up. He's a Toys R Us kid.
Essentially.
Okay. All right. Yeah, well, whatever. He seems like a good enough dude. He's involved in a lot of charitable causes.
Like his parents. I was watching a documentary.
Of course you were. Every time we start talking about something, it's like, well, this reminds me of that documentary I watched.
Well, but like he helped executive produce this documentary, and he was interviewed for it where he said like, oh, my parents introduced me to this artist. And I'm like, when you were 10, you were looking at this? You hippie?
He does seem like he was raised by hippies in a way. Like he's very bohemian.
Him and Joaquin
Phoenix. Yeah. Yeah. Are they friends? They should be.
I hope they are.
Yeah. In my head, they are. We'll have to ask them.
I know that Leo's friends with Tobey Maguire.
Oh, yeah. Well, they used to be a part of that pack. There was a pack of them when they were younger, the young days.
Yes.
When they ran out, they were clubbing. Like Ice Cube. We be clubbing. See, I know things.
That's because you're 45.
Are you saying Ice Cube's old?
Yeah.
Well, you start off the gangster rapper and then become the
America's
family
dad.
movie dad.
Right.
You live long enough to become the villain, am I right? Okay, let's talk about the serious stuff. First of all, let's talk about Ezra Miller. Oh my goodness. Ezra Miller, who is supposed to be playing the Flash in a movie that I assumed was pretty much close to done filming.
No, it wasn't.
But why? Like, this movie's been in development for it's been shooting forever.
I think that they realize there's some toxicness within Warner Brothers, and it might have made it into the movie, and so they keep reshooting.
Ezra Miller, who is supposed to be playing the Flash and is filming this movie, was arrested again last Tuesday in Hawaii after allegedly throwing a chair at a woman and leaving her with a gash to her forehead. He's got to be gone right now, right? I mean, they can't continue with him. First of all, this dude needs help. He's clearly got problems. And like, it's one thing to sit here and look at the headlines and be like, oh man, what a loose cannon. But at some point you got to be like, okay, we have to care about this dude as a human being.
And there is a pattern developing of this erratic behavior. Because again, a handful of years ago, he choke slammed a fan, some older lady, I want to say they were like in Sweden, Iceland, somewhere around there.
How did it get this far? Was it because he's kind of bohemian and people just thought, he's just different? But clearly this dude's got some pent up pain of some sort, because that's where all of this kind of stuff comes from, right?
Usually, yeah.
I mean, there's two options. He's either got some kind of pent up pain or he's a big jerk. And I think we want to believe the best in people.
Typically.
And we understand as ministers that brokenness comes from brokenness.
Yeah. And I don't know what has gone on in this life, what is going on in this life. I just know it doesn't look good, and it's not helpful for people around him. So
this latest incident came on the same day he appeared via Zoom in a Hilo, Hawaii courtroom to plead no contest to a disorderly conduct charge, which stemmed from an incident at a karaoke bar last month. So on the same day, another incident, he was taken into custody about 1:30 a.m. Tuesday for second-degree assault. Police say Miller allegedly became irate when asked to leave an acquaintance's home and threw a chair at a woman. The 26-year-old victim reported a half-inch cut to her forehead, and then he was eventually released. But more trouble for them. I don't know, like, this Flash movie is supposed to be like the linchpin from the moving forward of whatever it is they're going to do. Now I'm just there was a bunch of shakeups in the past week there. Like there's a new guy in charge maybe of the DC part of the Warner Brothers stuff.
Oh, I know that since Warner Brothers and Discovery combined, that the higher ups are now wanting to do like Disney and Marvel and create a completely separate studio where all they focus on is DC and have someone new that's not associated with the past issues.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. Since I am like, because for me, and I'm not a big DC guy, my first thought is like start from scratch, just completely start over. But since you're the DC guy, I'm going to defer to you. What do you think they should do now?
I mean, you can act like things have not happened, like certain movies, such as Justice League, and just keep telling individual Aquaman stories, keep telling Shazam, Black Adam, which those naturally cross over. Mm-hmm. And so you have their individual movies, and then you have the crossover movie, and then maybe down the line you establish a Justice League, but I think you just keep going with solo movies unless there is a natural crossover.
Okay.
Which, again, Shazam, Black Adam, they're like very closely connected.
I think I agree with that, because I think the problem with DC is they've been trying to fast forward what Marvel did.
Yeah.
Marvel had 22 movies building up to the Infinity conclusion.
Sagas.
Yeah, and a lot of those were solo movies. And granted, there were little Easter eggs that would point you toward that ending. I think Warner Brothers should slow way down. Like, just focus on making good individual movies, and we could talk about how to combine them later on.
Yeah, like you do a couple more Batman movies, you get a couple Superman movies out there.
Now, I'm a Marvel guy. Cody's more of a DC guy. BJ, what's your level of interest in comic book movies or comic books in general?
I love the movies, Marvel movies. I don't know much about DC, but I really like Marvel movies.
But so you're a lover of the entertainment, but you didn't grow up with comic books.
No.
Okay.
No. I didn't grow up reading. I was like, I am not reading anything.
So, the funny thing is I think you're part of the larger group now, because so many people fell in love with the MCU that now you have all these people who are really into that who have no background in the comics.
It's like Moon Knight. You guys probably know what's coming, and I don't have a clue what's coming.
No, I have no idea. And really? I read Moon Knight comics, but it's weird. Okay. It's super weird. I mean, you have a general idea because especially with the episode that debuted this week, and we're not going to get into any spoilers here. That'll be next week. We are going to talk about Moon Knight going into the finale next week, next pod. But it was clear this week, especially the last 10 minutes, dealing with the alleged mental institution. That's all I'll say. Where they're clearly borrowing from a run in the comics.
Okay.
But there's so much of it that's changed, and that you don't know the way they're using it. Yeah, like the Moon Knight. This has been one of the harder Marvel series, if you're a lover of the comics, to kind of predict, because they're combining a lot. They're coming up with their own material, and frankly, they should, because Moon Knight was just such a weird, trippy character in many ways. And Moon Knight himself in the comics has been changed and done differently so many times.
Really? Yeah.
So it's not like Captain America, where Steve Rogers is pretty much the same dude over the course of his existence. Moon Knight has been done lots of different ways.
Kind of like Batman in that regards, because Batman goes on different runs where, like, okay, he's a detective. Now he is.
He's
this
funny. Yeah.
funny
no,
dude.
he's savage. You know,
Yeah.
like
now he's emo.
right. Yeah,
And
exactly.
which
That's
they-
a good comparison, actually.
Yeah.
Like, it's not Superman. Superman's pretty much the same dude, but Batman has changed over the years several times. And I would say that, yeah, Moon Knight is much the same way. Is he's just a character that even in the comic book writing has lended itself to being like telling the writer or whoever is running the story at the time, like, hey, have fun with it. Do what you want to do with the character. And so it's kind of been fun as a comic book geek to watch the Moon Knight series and say, oh, someone's going to do their take on it. Because even like, you know, Loki, which was kind of an out there premise with the TVA and all that, they're still beholden to the comic book versions of Loki, right? They still have to tell a story that fits into these parameters, even as they were getting weird and out there. And it's been kind of refreshing to watch Moon Knight and just being like, hey, here's our own story about Moon Knight. The MCU Moon Knight is going to be our own version. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Not knowing, as a comic book lover, not having any idea of how what direction they're going to go with this has been fun.
Yeah. So, Cody, you think they should eliminate this Flash movie that's coming out?
Yeah, or you bring in TV's Arrowverse Flash Grant to reshoot all Ezra scenes, or like Photoshop him in. And
I think it would be really interesting to see Grant Gustin on the big screen as Flash, because part of the complaint against the Grant Gustin would be like, oh, that show's so goofy. It's like, yeah, but it's a TV show.
Yes.
If you give him the movie sensibility and the cinematography of a movie, I mean, he could play a serious Flash.
oh yeah,
And it would be kind of cool to see.
yeah. You don't have to be married to Ezra to have a Flash movie.
I thought you were going to say you don't have to be married to Ezra to take a chair in the fort.
That would be
Apparently, you just have to be a bystander.
Well, I was thinking, how quick did, okay, once again, I'm not a pop culture guy, but didn't Will Smith lose a lot when he slapped Chris Rock?
Well, that's still being
it's
fleshed
still
out, but I'm going to say,
falling-
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he
But
appears to be
this
losing
dude-
quite a bit.
This dude can hit a chick in the head with a chair, and they're like, we might still keep you. Like,
Okay, but you bring up an interesting point there. Like, it's weird. Okay, so there's like this criticalness in our society that we've talked about a lot on this podcast. But it seems like we decide when to utilize it.
yeah.
So I think with Ezra, we've been given every opportunity to say, like, man, this dude has issues and needs help. And with Will, I think people naturally wanted to be that way with Will. That's why at first everyone's like, Chris Rock's horrible.
Right,
How dare he make that joke? I'm with Will. And that's because we like Will.
We do.
Will Smith is a beloved figure in that industry.
And everybody hates Chris.
But I think as time has gone on, we're like, okay, now you're seeing more, especially like Jada Pinkett Smith did another episode of their podcast, but without Will. And like, I think people are starting to see like, oh man, they've got real issues. And he's got real trauma from his past, and she's got real trauma, and they're having a real hard time.
Right.
And so I will say it might be the stage that Will was on, that it was like broadcast across national television. Although Ezra Miller, the incident back in whatever Scandinavian country, that he chokeslammed the lady. It was filmed. Like, I have watched the film of him taking her out after she was just laughing and was trying to get an autograph or something, and then boom, like he flips a switch and like.
So is there like some political double standard there? Like, we're gonna make this stance on Will.
The problem with Ezra is the way he comes across in these moments is he's obnoxious. He's very unlikable.
See, I don't know who this dude is.
So like I've been reading a lot about the Hawaiian stuff. The stuff you're getting from people in Hawaii about this whole situation is that he's basically detestable. That they just don't like him. He's not a likable person. But again, we have a hard time as human beings distinguishing that when someone's being like that, it's still brokenness. Like there's like this comes from a place of trauma and brokenness, and it's just harder because we can all look at Will Smith on the other hand and say, boy, he's never done anything like that. It was just like he overflowed. His brokenness overflowed in that moment. And with Ezra, it's different. But that's why, like, talking about Ezra Miller, I start to get really concerned because I'm like, man, is anybody checking on this dude? And as recent things with like Bruce Willis has told us, a lot of these actors are being used and no care is being given to their condition.
Yeah.
So Bruce Willis was essentially been made to act over the last several years, even though he had this condition where he couldn't even remember his lines, but like he's being driven by these people that are gravy training him. We're still making money off him. And this poor dude, doesn't get thought about. Well, it may be the same with Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller, most likely everyone can see needs help, but someone's making money off these contracts he's signing.
That's true. Yeah.
And the questions always comes down to like, does anyone care about this dude? Because someone should. Yeah. Or are we just going to let him keep acting out, getting arrested, and then lose his worth, and then everyone will abandon him? And that would be a tragic thing. That'd be tragic. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard watching people go through things publicly. Because when I go through things, it's just between me and the walls of my house, and God. Yep. And Ezra Miller, I actually feel, even with you read these like accounts and he's obnoxious, I find myself feeling for him and being like, man, is there anyone in his corner that's caring about him right now? And I just don't know if there is. I just don't know. Yeah, we can move on. I had nothing else to say. I wanted to know about the input on the DC stuff. Where do you think it's going to go from here?
Yeah, I think you can keep going, but like get rid of that idea of having a universe for the time being.
I am looking at an article now where they said it's basically an article about Ezra Miller and caring about like his mental health, and then that maybe some people are coming around to this, but he's clearly a danger to others right now, which means he's probably a danger to himself. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on to a different poo storm.
Oh.
In the world of Hollywood, and that would be the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial.
I almost brought his name up. Yeah.
There's a reason that we use poo storm.
Well, like the weird thing is not many people are talking about this trial, and I've been following it, and it's bonkers. Like the stuff they're talking about is bonkers.
Yeah.
And there's been these other news items that kind of luckily maybe for them, kind of take the spotlight off it. But basically they're in a courtroom and they're arguing about who was abusive. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff that's being brought out here is just bonkers. So Johnny Depp took the stand.
Jonathan, as I like to call him.
Jonathan. We like to use their full Christian name here in Pop Culture Pastor. But he took the stand this week. This is a $50 million defamation case that he's brought against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. So she wrote some op-ed about abusees being abused, living through abuse. She didn't mention his name, but everybody knew who she was talking about. And Johnny Depp lost work. This is why he's suing her for money. He's saying it's all a lie. In fact, he said this in the trial. He said, never did I myself reach the point of striking Miss Heard in any way, nor have I ever struck any woman in my life. He said, violence is unnecessary. Why would I hit someone to make them agree with me? I don't even think it works. It's just not me. Instead, Johnny's on the stand and he says it's Heard who is violent with him. And during his testimony on Wednesday, he accused her of throwing 2 bottles of vodka at him after he suggested they get a post-nuptial agreement. First of all, that's not a thing. A post-nuptial agreement? I think what you're looking for, John, is a divorce. That cracked me up. I'm like, a post-nuptial agreement?
That don't work.
Well, you should have realized that prenuptial.
Right. Yeah.
That blew my mind. I was like, well, yep, that'll do it. I could see why she got angry. You stop short of throwing bottles at him. And that incident severed the tip of one of his fingers.
I was going to say, I read that he lost a little bit of a finger.
Yeah. It delayed filming on a Pirates of the Caribbean movie that he was working on at the time. The court also this week heard recordings of the couple arguing. Amber Heard was heard saying on the recording, "I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you." And she went on to say, "I was not punching you, babe. You're not punched." So, but she was hitting him. Like, I don't know. The recording sounds bonkers too. She comes off looking kind of bonkers, to be honest.
Yeah.
Which of course was what they're trying to prove. She wrote this op-ed, of course, that all led to this, and the whole trial is based on this. That Johnny says that she's the one who, quote, roundhouse punched him in the cheek.
I don't even know how you do a roundhouse punch.
I was sitting here trying to figure that out too.
Said Johnny Depp said in the trial, what was just played on these audio recordings was very much the tone and the aggression and the attitude and the need for a fight from Miss Heard. The actor spoke about another fight. This is all coming from Yahoo Entertainment. That Amber Heard supposedly instigated when she started scratching Depp in 2015. He admitted to trying to restrain her and that there was accidental contact, but not a headbutt, as she has claimed. There was contact with our heads, with our foreheads, but it wasn't an intentional. He said it's something that happens when you're trying to calm someone down who's in that state of mind.
Oh, Johnny, you got to learn the proper restraint holds.
Yeah, he was a MANT certified.
Because you got to get low.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, first of all, can you imagine, like, this is a man. Like, he's a manly Hollywood man who is putting a trial front and center, basically saying he's been abused. Mm. Like, there's a lot of soul swallowing going on here for Johnny Depp. And again, I just feel like, oh man, there's all this brokenness in this. Because if what he says is true, then Amber Heard has got some issues. Mm-hmm. But oh my goodness, again, too, another case of a much older man and a younger woman. And I'm not saying anything is anything here, but I think we've seen enough in this country in the last 10 years to know that generational differences are a big deal.
Yeah, totally.
They're a big deal, and there's more there than we want to give credit for. And especially there's more there on how I relate to just an everyday person, not someone I'm trying to spend the rest of my life with. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you see these much younger women with these older men, and you're like, yeah, that's going to be hard. That's harder than you think it's going to be. And I'm not saying it's all on Johnny Depp either. Clearly, Amber Heard wanted to be with Johnny. Mm-hmm. And why wouldn't you? You know, there's a magnetic thing that goes on with these movie stars. And we talked about Leonardo DiCaprio being with a much younger lady. And it's not fair to just say, oh, that's all on Leonardo. No. There are two adults there. Yeah. And she bears that responsibility too. But I think what I'm saying is that generational thing, we don't think about that as much, but that's a thing.
Yeah. Your world view is different, even if you don't recognize it. It's different.
Well, and especially now because,
Yeah.
you know, it used to be the boomers weren't all that different from their parents, even though in their formative years they rebelled, right?
Right.
But their lives weren't that much different. Now, from generation to generation, life is just changing so quickly.
Yep.
And so it's resulting in these generational differences that are abundantly
Extremes.
wide. And that's both fascinating to me and scary when I think about my children.
Yeah.
Because I have to continue to try to relate to them. It's hard. It's like I'm dealing with right now. I have a 14-year-old. My oldest is 14 and she has a phone. And I'm trying to deal with this. On one side, I'm like, I can't deny her because everyone has one. And it's the ultimate form of communication now. Everything runs through it. But at the same time, I see the problems that come with it that I didn't have to deal with. I had enough problems on my own, but then I can't take my 14-year-old out of her context and put it in my context because that doesn't work either. Like, and what I'm left with is like, no, we have to figure out how to exist in this context together. And she's going to have to figure out how to control her phone usage on her own because I can't stop that waterfall from happening. Eventually she's going to have to learn how to use this phone and not let it use her.
Right. And it's hard.
And so the generational thing just kind of screams at you with this Johnny Depp thing. I mean, Johnny Depp's 21 Jump Street. Amber Heard was probably not born when 21 Jump Street came out.
So she's 3 years older than me, I believe. So
She's older than I thought then.
she was born in 86.
Okay. Yeah, she was alive when 21... yeah. She was probably alive when 21 Jump Street came out.
Maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not going to look it up. It's not that important. All right. Do we have anything else to say about Johnny and Amber Heard other than we hope this ends in the best way possible? I mean, someone's going to lose some money here. Both of them have lost something.
Totally. Yeah.
And no more pirates.
Yeah.
No more pirates.
No more Pirates of the Caribbean probably is what this means. Although I could have said that about 4 movies ago.
Yeah.
If we're being honest. I'd had enough after maybe 2.
Agree.
Although the new Pirates has is her name Nebula?
I don't want to hear it.
From Guardians.
I never watched it.
You watch Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, I watched Guardians of the Galaxy. I didn't watch the new Pirates movie.
Oh, it hasn't
I haven't
come out.
watched the last few.
It hasn't come out
What,
yet.
they're making another one?
Yes.
Why?
Because they have to reboot the franchise because Johnny Depp got into...
They do not have to reboot the franchise, as it turns out.
So they're making a movie, not like a mini series like everything else?
They're making a movie.
Let me just be really
with
clear.
Karen Gillian.
Let me just be really clear about Pirates of the Caribbean. It is probably up there at number 2, right under Fast and Furious. I don't understand why there's so many movies. Because I could make a pretty good argument that they only made one good Pirates of the Caribbean, and that was the first one. Everything since has been garbage.
Yeah.
I wasn't anti-2.
I mean, but you weren't pro either. It was just kind of there. And then 3 is just terrible. And then after that, oh my goodness, it's just junk.
Well, there was only one after it.
Hey, but if it sells, if they make money, they're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly it's Disney.
Jerry Bruckheimer.
I'd rather go ride Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I mean, like, where's the teacup ride? Anything else but Pirates of the Caribbean. I just don't understand it. It's right up there with Fast and Furious for me. I'm like, man, the first movie was great. Everything after that, hot garbage.
Family.
And it always comes back to Fast and Furious. All right, we got to go out to the lobby. We're going to go out to the lobby to get ourselves a snack and answer listener questions. We'll meet you out in the lobby right after this. right, we're out in the lobby. It is time to answer listener questions. Cody, are you ready?
Yeah, I was quoting The Office as we were entering the lobby, but yeah, I'm ready.
It happens. The Office is very quotable. Okay, let's start off with this question. Scott Patrick Dillon, what are some of your favorite college memories? Do you have some favorite college? Do I need to go first while you're thinking?
I'll let you go first, and I'll circle back.
Okay, so the college, asking me my college memories is weird because I went back to college later in life.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume you're asking about like my early 20s years. Now I was around to college because I actually worked in the University of Kansas's athletic department. I got a plum job there. And so one of the cool things about that was I got to stand on the sideline at football games. Like, not with the team, but down the sidelines a ways. And then also we got great seats at Allen Fieldhouse for all the basketball games. We would hold back a block of seats for the people that worked in the athletic department. And so like we would actually get to sit a lot behind the visitor bench for KU basketball games. And I remember going to every game and thinking that was a pretty good time in my life. That was a good time. Just randomly, when I'm comparing that time of my life to this time of my life, you know what I really miss about being younger and college age type years? I really miss just going to a movie on my own spontaneously. Just going to the theater for a matinee or something and going by myself to watch a movie. I miss being able to do that.
Those are legit. And yeah. Good one.
I love my kids, but taking them to a movie is like a chore. They got to go to the bathroom like 5 times. They want refills on popcorn and drinks. And I'm just like, I get big ones so I don't have to get refills. And then I make it last because I'm not getting up.
Or you just be the meanest dad ever and say, no one gets any snacks or beverages and you'll deal with it.
Yeah, but then I don't enjoy the movie because they're not going to sit there silently. Anyways, going to the movies was fun by yourself. I miss that, but I love my kids.
Okay, so during your talk, I did think of a couple.
Okay.
So, like, I had a couple different friend groups in college just because I went to a JUCO first and then I went to a private Christian college. Mm-hmm. But one of my friend groups early on in JUCO, they were all about pop culture. And so I watched a ton of movies I had never seen before. Some older ones, some newer ones, some of those indie films, and kind of developed a love of indie films. But through this friend group, I also got a job working at a mental health center in a PRG group with kids. And through that, I actually got to fly a plane.
Say what now? Wait, whoa. Where'd that leap come from?
So
1 minute you're working with kids and the next minute you're flying planes?
They would take field trips during the summer months because it was a longer program. And so they went out to the airport, and one of the flight students that was there who was working on becoming a flight instructor, it's like, I have to have so many hours with other people flying where I do the takeoff and the landing, but you guys do the flying. Would you like to go with me? And this was Brian, John, and myself. And so we got to fly to Bartlesville and back, get some barbecue.
Wow.
And then when I went on to Kansas Wesleyan, it was super fun. I mean, Salina is kind of a hipster cowboy town. It's so weird of a combination, but I had a lot of fun memories going to concerts, going to comedy shows. I saw Brian Regan live. And then when I did the whole seminary thing, I met Ben Roethlisberger, but that wasn't because of college. So,
Also, just a little tidbit, Salina, we're coming to your Comic-Con in July.
yeah, it's happening.
We're going to Comic-Con there in July, so you can look for Pop Culture Pastor if you live in Salina. I don't know if anyone listening lives in Salina, but
Or the greater area of Salina.
David Harrison says, what would happen if Goku and Superman fought, in y'all's opinion? I don't know who. I'm not into the anime. Who's Goku?
He has some sweet hair.
Yeah, like, unfortunately, I cannot answer this question, Dave, because I am not really into that. And does that make me old if I'm not into the anime? That's Dragon Ball, right?
It is Dragon Ball. You are correct. I had to make sure that I was not getting confused.
Yeah.
I would lean. I'm leaning Soups, but if it's like any battle with Superman, sure enough, Goku would have like kryptonite underwear or something, and so there's a chance that Goku could pull it off.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's all you get because I have nothing to bring to that conversation. Lauren Allen says, which Star Wars movie or series is your favorite? Do you prefer Star Wars in live action or animation? I've had to do some soul searching with the Star Wars stuff because when the prequels came out, I would have called myself a Star Wars super fan.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Star Wars. And then the prequels are somewhat of a disappointment. Although, if we're being fair, you know, a lot of that was unfair expectations.
Oh, yeah.
Not seeing the original trilogy for what it was, like building it into something different in my head, and then grading the prequels by what was in my head, not what was actually on film. Because the dialogue's not necessarily great in the original trilogy, but I would say when you've got Harrison Ford delivering it, it seems better.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, even though those actors were young, they definitely proved to be tremendous talents. Mark Hamill's one of the greatest voice actors of his generation, for sure.
Voice acting doesn't always translate
into like real good acting. But and then you have Harrison Ford, who for a while had the highest grossing films ever, and I think he's been replaced by maybe Sam Jackson now. But
yeah, so Lauren, the prequels come out, and I mean, there's good moments in some of those movies. But really, overall, I'm just kind of mildly soured by Star Wars. And then by the time the sequels come out, like, look, the sequels, the most recent Star Wars movies. So basically, first of all, the prequels sour me on any of the animation stuff. I did not watch Clone Wars. I did not watch Rebels. I've been told that I should, that they're actually pretty good. And watching the new stuff in the TV series that have come out from Filoni, who had a lot to do with Rebels, has maybe prompted me to convince me to go back and watch some of those animated series. But I didn't watch those. And the prequels kind of sour me. And then the sequels come out. And like, I think if we're being honest and fair with the sequels, is like Lucasfilm can cut a trailer, man. Boy, can they cut a trailer. But the execution of those movies was not great.
No. So for me, like movies that are not a part of the original trilogy, Rogue One might be my favorite. I'm not going to lie. As far as series, Mandalorian.
Yeah. And it's what's crazy is that the sequels have a different problem than the prequels. Whereas the prequels, it's just clunky script writing, clunky dialogue, but the story itself is actually pretty legit. It's pretty detailed. There's a lot of moving parts to it. It would be the story in the sequels that is junk. and the dialogue's much better, but it doesn't really matter when your story doesn't make sense.
And poor Ryan Johnson gets crucified.
Yeah.
While we give JJ all the breaks.
Well, see, and it depends on the context, depends on who you're looking at it through. Because from the studio's point of view, Ryan Johnson's the bad guy because he went in and he did his own thing and he messed up their story they were trying to tell. But Ryan Johnson, from his point of view, is that's what you wanted me to do. You thought that would work. And then when the fans didn't like all the choices I made, you like reacted too much to the fans and just erased kind of what I did. And that's why the story's so bad. Because you just ignored the second movie and a lot of the choices that were made.
And I will still say it. I'll go back to Super 8. JJ can tell a good story up to a certain part. He doesn't always know how to end it. And like it gets wonky. Like usually last quarter of the film. It doesn't make sense. I don't know why this happens, but it is J.J. Abrams through and through.
Yeah. So the movies, the sequels, I don't like at all. They don't have any place in my heart, which makes me sad. The prequels have a small place in my heart, but upon rewatching, which I've just recently done with my kids, Phantom Menace, if you take out the lightsaber battle at the end, which is probably the best lightsaber battle in the whole saga, with Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. If you take that out, it's not a very good movie, but it has moments. The second one, Attack of the Clones, is garbage. From top to bottom.
I assume that every scene that had Jar Jar in it, you loved.
Jar Jar's hardly in the second one because people complained about Jar Jar. And then he's in the second one barely, but he's not the problem. The problem is the dialogue is just awful. The acting is awful. And like, look, it's not just people blamed
Hayden
Christensen, but Natalie Portman's just as bad in it. And Natalie Portman is a good actress. So
she's won the Oscars.
Yeah, so the problem wasn't them. It's just a bad movie. The story's bad. Like that whole romance is just weird.
Yeah.
Like it makes Anakin very stalkerish and obsessive, and it's just weird. It's just not very well written. And then Revenge of the Sith is okay, but mostly for reasons because we just waited a long time to see things we wanted to see. And even then, it's disappointing on some levels. But
yeah.
it was a step up from 2, so we're like, oh, it's probably the best one of that series. So my favorite movies remain probably Empire and Return of the Jedi because they hit me in my wheelhouse. It has more to do with my age than anything else. Those movies hit me at the age where I'm a kid, and they just have a special place in my heart. And then the TV series, I think Mandalorian is probably my favorite. Boba Fett didn't completely work for me, but it wasn't bad.
So I will say, if we can get a Timothy Oliphant spinoff,
oh yeah,
I'm in. Take all my money.
I'm here for anything Timothy Oliphant.
Yes, especially if it's like Western themed, and this is a space Western. Yeah. So,
next question, maybe the last question here. This is from Joshua Jones, who lives in Georgia.
Oh, hello, Joshua.
Joshua's good dude. Just had a baby. Congratulations, Joshua.
Shout out.
Woot woot. Okay. He says, what comic book run is your all-time favorite? Mine is Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Batman run a few years back, starting with the Court of Owls.
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay.
You're a Batman guy. Is that something you share?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I really can't argue that. Oh, now I'm thinking.
I can share a couple of mine. Mine are going to be, largely 1980s. There was a Captain America run where he is the Nomad. So by this time, John Walker, who we were introduced to in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the MCU's version, has taken over as Captain America. Steve Walker has been, ungloriously shipped off. Been not able to be Captain America anymore. He's Nomad. And during this run, there's a run of a villain named Scourge, who basically his whole goal is he's assassinating villains. And so in the Marvel Universe, in this run, like just many random villains are murdered in this run. And like Spider-Man villains, like just some of the random ones. And there was some big names killed. Like I want to say one of the major Sinister Six villains is killed, maybe Electro, which I'm sure he was brought back eventually. But it was a very interesting storyline because you're dealing with a different kind of villain. He's more of a vigilante, and he's murdering villains, and you don't know how to feel about that because like they're bad dudes, but also he's a bad dude, right? And then it's juxtaposed with this multi-issue run of Captain America, Steve Rogers, dealing with the fact that he doesn't get to be Captain America anymore, and he's kind of on the move. He's on the run. You know, he's an enemy of the state in a lot of ways because he's still practicing superheroism, but as the nomad character instead of Captain America. So that was an interesting run. I liked that run. Also, the other big run for me that I think about when I was a younger person, when I was a kid, was Kraven's Last Hunt from the Spider-Man series, which involved Kraven the Hunter literally burying Spider-Man Peter Parker alive and assuming the identity of Spider-Man. Kraven, it's important to note, has absolutely lost his mind in this scenario. And it was just such a heavy, like intense thing for a kid to read. You know, comic books in general could be kind of silly. Like the MCU, what they get right in the movies is that sometimes it can be kind of tongue in cheek and silly. And that really reminds me of the way comic books used to be written. But also they could tell these really intense stories like Kraven's Last Hunt. And that one was, I mean, it was super intense. I mean, literally Peter Parker is buried alive in this time.
Eek.
Yeah, it was nuts. It's like a 6-issue run, I think. But that's one of my favorites as well. Infinity Gauntlet, of course, would have been one of my absolute favorites, which is highly adapted into the whole Infinity run. Thanos, all of that. Did you think of any of the comic book runs?
So I will go with almost anything by Frank Miller. I really like Frank.
Yeah.
But his run with The Dark Knight Returns, that was a good one, where Batman kind of retires, but then this is after Jason Todd dies. Spoiler. But he comes back and like Gotham is out of control, and so he has to do that. And then the Nightfall run. And this is where you get Bane releasing all of Gotham's criminals and Batman having to run the gauntlet and then finding out who it is that's behind this. And like Batman's getting older. Azrael's in it. Robin's in it. And then Bane breaks the bat. Although the further on it goes after that, it kind of teeters out. But like that initial, like once like Bane and Batman are there, like drama galore. I love it.
I'll get full disclosure, not a big Frank guy.
You either like him or you don't.
Yeah,
I haven't heard anyone say, he's okay.
Weirdly enough, because lots of people love that Dark Knight Returns story. Which is kind of like an otherworld story. Like it's an alternate reality type thing, right? Robin's a girl in it. I wasn't a fan of that, but weirdly enough, I loved 300, the graphic novel 300.
Yeah.
Which was by Frank Miller. It's about a fictional account of the Battle of Thermopylae, the Spartans. And I loved that book. Because it was historical fiction is just the way to my heart because I'm a history guy.
Yeah.
And then there's this legend of this battle where 300 Spartans stand up to the Persian army and gloriously sacrifice themselves to stop them, you know. And then it's told through that sort of thing just was through the Frank Miller, lens was amazing. It was perfect.
Yeah.
And then when they made that into a movie to be told through the Zack Snyder lens was perfect. Perfection. really anything Frank Miller does, if you wanted to let Zack Snyder direct it, I'd be all for it. Because I think they line up pretty well.
Yeah.
Because I love the movie too. I thought it was Zack Snyder's best.
You can't call Watchmen a run, I guess, because it was just those amount of issues. Although they've done some prequel things now, but Watchmen was really good. The comics,
I agree. Alan Moore.
Yeah.
All right, that was a great question, by the way.
Yeah,
and I could have gone all day. There's lots of. I mean, Thor's Ragnarok run in like the late '80s was good. Balder dying, leading off to like this setting off in motion of all these events. I really loved Thor. The Thor run, even more recently, where he's unworthy. He, cuts his hair and, like, man, there's so many good runs out there. The original Winter Soldier line, I can't remember who did that for Captain America, but when Bucky comes back and the Winter Soldier, that's a great run. Yeah,
there's a lot of good ones. It just depends on your favorite characters, because
Secret Invasion's good.
You don't always read the ones that.
I was a sucker for the summer crossover.
Yeah.
There's one that doesn't get much play because it was kind of weird, but it was called The Evolutionary War. And the main guy in it was the High Evolutionary, who there's rumors we may meet in the next Guardians of the Galaxy movie. But that one, I liked that one. And it was kind of deep for Marvel, especially for a summer crossover. There was a summer crossover event in the X books called Inferno that I really enjoyed. Just Fall of the Mutants, all of it. I was a sucker for those summer crossovers. Acts of Vengeance, where all the villains teamed up and then decided, hey, the problem is we're going against heroes that know us. So let's instead of Doctor Doom going after the Fantastic Four, let him go after, someone else like the X-Men. And instead of, Magneto going after the X-Men, he'll go after the Fantastic Four. So they had this, it was just a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was a sucker for those summer crossovers. That was a good question, Josh, but we could be here all day. So let's just end it now. Good questions. We got more questions than we know what to do with. So we'll have to answer some you've already asked next time in the lobby. Right now, it's time for us to go back into the main theater, and where we will talk about our main point this week. It's our very first episode with a Be Kind Rewind. This week, we're be kinding and rewinding Wayne's World. It's the 30th anniversary of Wayne's World.
Party on.
Party on. We'll come back and party on in just a moment. All right, welcome back. It's time for our very first Be Kind Rewind. This is going to be a podcast subject that when we do a Be Kind Rewind, we're going to go back and watch an old movie.
Going back in time.
Going back and to just talk about it and kind of revisit some things that came from it. The first one we're doing, it's the 30th anniversary of Wayne's World. Now, Wayne's World is based on a Saturday Night Live skit and comes out in 1992, and it makes great money. It's released on Valentine's Day in 1992. And you have to understand to understand the success of this movie, I feel like we have to set up a little bit what this is coming out of. So, first of all, there's only been one Saturday Night Live movie at this point, right? That was the Blues Brothers with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi.
I nearly said Jim, and then I would have felt gross about it.
Yeah, so. It wasn't Jim, it was John. And Blues Brothers is a cult classic. It's successful, but not in a monetary sense. But it's successful in that it's a beloved movie over time. And I think the belovedness of that movie is they stay true to this idea of like who they are as the characters. Like it's a gloriously strange movie is the Blues Brothers. Mm-hmm. And I actually think there's a lot of similarities with Wayne's World in that this is just a movie that they decide we're just going to make this movie about these kids in Aurora, Illinois, who just like to have fun. And I think that's why it works. Because it's gloriously beholden to the characters.
Yeah. And it's not a too far out concept.
Yeah.
Like two kids having a public access show in their parents' basement.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the public access part does not, like kids watching it today are not going to understand that. But imagine it's YouTube, that they're YouTubers instead. Public access was just like you could just get on the air on public access and make your own show. It was sort of YouTube for back in the day, but you actually had to go to like a studio. But instead, what these guys did was broadcast it through public access from their basement, their parents' basement. That was the whole conceit of the skit. Saturday Night Live at this time, just before this time, like in the late 80s, it has this like glorious resurgence that's predicated on just getting all of this talent at once. Mm-hmm. And Mike Myers and Dana Carvey are kind of the leaders of this charge. And so to just let you in on what it was like in like 88, 89, when I was in middle school, you would come to school on Monday and lunchroom was all about talking about, man, did you see Saturday Night Live this weekend? It was unbelievable. And Wayne's World, you just talk about these skits, and Wayne's World was a popular skit. That was one of the favorites. And it was just so like my 14-year-old daughter is completely lost on her. She doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. Not a fan of this movie, not a fan of the skits. She's just like sitting there going, I don't understand. I don't get it. So there's something generational to it.
And also, like, I feel like growing up around that time, you knew someone that was kind of like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in the characters alone. So Wayne, Mike Myers' character is based on like people he knew and maybe a little bit on himself. And Garth, Dana Carvey has said is based largely on his older brother, who was into like these hair metal bands, but was this quiet, reserved, shy dude who like Garth. And we'll get into this a little later because there was some friction between Dana Carvey and Mike Myers during the filming of this.
Michael
Garth is a wonderfully fleshed out character in the movie of like, and he's great. Like his character is amazing. And you fall in love with Garth.
Yeah.
Because he's got like this, so he's like into the heavy metal and hair band. You get a certain vision in your head when you think of someone who's into that. And then you're confronted with Garth Algar, who's like this sweet, mild-mannered, quiet guy. And it's just a wonderful like juxtaposition. So Wayne's World comes at this time when Saturday Night Live is probably at its peak.
I will say that, yeah. You got the late 80s into the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And then I will say there's several years that I thought Mad TV was way better than Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And you can cut both programs out.
Well, depends on when we're talking about, because Mad TV was on for a while. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think there's a point when Saturday Night Live is big, but then they start leaving for movies, which we'll talk about that later too. But, when Sandler leaves and you had Chris Rock and he leaves and David Spade and all these dudes who are going on to other things, then you have this crowd for a while that's like, maybe the best skit is the superstar lady. And then, I'm like with you. I'm like, Mad TV at that time was probably better.
Yeah.
But man, there was a while there with Farley and those guys where, Saturday Night Live, you just couldn't touch it.
Well, those guys left or got fired.
Okay, so let's start with Wayne's World. Wayne's World, if you've never seen Wayne's World, first of all, it's just a silly movie, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, growing up, it was on Comedy Central all the time. Like that. So what Rocky was to TBS, Wayne's World felt like it was for Comedy Central, that oh, this is our Saturday movie of the day. And so, like, it'd just be on every Saturday.
Yeah. I don't know what this was rated, but I would call it PG-13. Like, I'd have no problem letting my 14-year-old watch this and just being able to talk her through it a couple parts. I think there's like a couple curse words, but they're all in the same scene, and they're played for comedy. Like they go to a rock club, and it's actually the Meatloaf cameo.
Yes.
And the Meatloaf says, later on the Poopy Beatles, except he doesn't say poopy. The Poopy Beatles are playing, and Mike Myers says, oh, do they suck? And he's like, oh, is it? He says, are they really poopy, or is it just a clever name? And Meatloaf is like, oh, they suck. And so, like, it's played for laughs. So I appreciated that. Also, there's, a scene where Wayne and Cassandra, his girl, are in bed, and Wayne's wearing underwear, tidy whities. And it's, again, played for laughs while the message gratuitous sex scene is flashed at the bottom of the screen. Obviously, there's nothing there that's really gratuitous. It's just meant to be a joke.
I love the amount of breaking the fourth wall that they do in this movie.
Yeah. Well, it's really kind of one of the first mainstream movies that does that. Now it's like everyone does Deadpool. Like everyone does this thing now. The Office TV show was a big doer of breaking the
Jim
fourth wall.
does that all the time.
Yeah. But people don't remember that Wayne's World was a big instigator in that. And Wayne's World, actually, while we bring up The Office, we should tell you that Michael Scott's catchphrase, that's what she said, is not actually a Michael Scott catchphrase. It's a Wayne Campbell catchphrase. He literally says in this movie, Shaw, that's what she said.
Literally, I found myself saying, well, Michael Scott says this and Michael Scott says that. And there's a couple of scenes where I'm like, oh, Mike stealing from Mike.
And this movie is, like, if nothing else, if you knew nothing about this movie and you just watched it, you would notice some of the phrases, the catchphrase. This movie is one of the most quoted movies through the latter half of the 20th century, or latter portion of the 20th century and into the 21st century. I mean, you'll still hear old people quote this movie. Not. I mean, just the amount of influence this has on our culture, Wayne's World, is amazing.
So upon rewatching it, because I probably have not seen it since I've been married, and I've been married 7 years. So it had been a while. I completely forgot how early on some of the most iconic scenes of the movie are. Like when they're singing Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody. That's fairly early in the movie. Like for some reason in my head, I had it like in the middle. Nope.
Yeah. So the movie starts off with you going right to the basement, and they're in the middle of filming their public access television show. That's when they have the Suck Cut guy on.
Yeah, Suck Cut.
So what they would do is they would always have this guest on, and sometimes they'd have like this ridiculous invention they were trying to pawn off. But this dude's like, I have the Suck Cut. As you can see, it sucks while it cuts. And, of course, Wayne is like, it certainly does suck. And then, he's cutting Garth's hair. It's like, okay, man, but just trim. It's like from the first scene, you get like this wonderful Wayne's World kind of vibe that made it so funny as a skit. And then he introduces himself basically. So the show ends. You get Mike Myers as Wayne Campbell saying, hello, I'm Wayne Campbell. I'm from Aurora, Illinois. Excellent. And he's like, the best part about Wayne is he's so relatable. So he takes you by a board of hairnets and name tags from all the Joe jobs, quote unquote, he's had. And you immediately identify with this dude. Again, the Wayne's World characters, like I wasn't into heavy metal and rock like that, but I knew people that were, and it just so perfectly encapsulate these people in a way where they're not like hardcore headbanging dudes, like they're regular Joes, regular dudes. And part of the thing I loved about the movie is that they're good dudes, right?
Yeah. Like, it's funny when they do have their quote unquote falling out during the movie. It's while an airplane's going over, and like Garth, who's been quiet this whole time, it looks like he's getting really animated, but you can't hear a word he's saying.
Yeah. So like even when he's maybe saying something, he says something bad because it's played for laugh. The plane goes over, you can't hear what he's saying, and then Wayne is like, "You kiss your mother with that mouth?" I can't. Who are you? So he's apparently said something pretty bad to Wayne. Man, I appreciated the comedy of this movie so much. It made me wistful to watch this movie again because it really was like, even though there's a couple curse words played for laugh, even though there's an intimate scene played for laughs with Wayne and Cassandra, where they're in bed together, although they're clothed, the innocence of it was like, I just felt really nostalgic for it because the 80s was like that. Like there were movies we watched as kids that had curse words in it, but there was an innocence to it that we don't have anymore. And one of the things I'd explain here is like these dudes were so these are supposed to be high school kids, first of all. That's part of the hilarity is that 30-some-year-old Dana Carvey is wearing like a rock feathered wig and he's a high school kid named Garth, right? Part of what I love about this movie that I had never noticed before is these guys are all about going out and having fun. And there is never any specific reference to them drinking or doing any drugs. The only reference you get is one of their friends, one of the members of their friends group clearly they find him inebriated and they don't shame him, but it's played for like, dude, you're partied out again.
Yeah.
And they like chastise him for it. And it's so I really appreciated that like this movie, these guys are all about having fun and they're going to rock clubs and you see some beverages, but that's not what they're about.
Yeah.
And I really kind of didn't ever notice that before. And I was rewatching it. I was like, this is all right. This is awesome.
Rob Lowe like shared champagne with them and they didn't know anything about champagne.
They're very uncultured.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joke, but it just makes them the innocence factor of Wayne and Garth are at a high level.
He better not spew in my car.
Oh, so yeah. So that first scene where it's actually in the middle of the Bohemian Rhapsody scene, they find their friend who is quote unquote partied out. Like, you're partied out again, man. And Garth immediately goes like, "Hey, what if he vomits in my car?" And Wayne's like, "I'm giving you a no honk guarantee." And of course, they use all these words, and that's the famous scene where Garth pulls out the Pixie cup, the Dixie cup, and he's like, "If you're gonna spew into this." Part of the ongoing joke of Wayne's World was all the words they could use as a synonym for vomiting. Because later on, it's revisited in the scene where Garth asks Wayne, like, "What happens if every time you see this certain girl, you feel like you're gonna throw up?" And he's like, "I say blow chunks." If he uses another word, if he's like, "If you Ralph and she stays, it was meant to be. But if you blow chunks and she bolts, it wasn't meant to be." So they're constantly using synonyms for throwing up, which I found hilarious.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, the conceit of the movie is that these two lovable idiots basically have this public access show, and that Rob Lowe is which he's so good at playing like the evil guy who's in it for the money, decides he's going to come kind of exploit them, take their show, sell it, and make it into something that erases the charm from it and just drain it for money.
I will say, watching it, I couldn't help but think back to Parks and Rec.
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a slight shift from being Chris Traeger to being his character in Wayne's World, because he's spewing out like positive, uplifting things like, oh yeah, I know a lot of guys that really love your show. You guys are the best. I record it all the time. And he's doing these positive, reaffirming things, and he at one point says literally, and I'm like, Chris Traeger.
So one of the cool things about this is Rob Lowe. This is going to sound weird because now you'd be like, why was that a scandal? But Rob Lowe goes through this scandal. He's a member of the Brat Pack, which was like the young group of actors who were the next big thing in the 80s. And then he gets through this scandal, which essentially was like a sex tape. Essentially, which I don't even know why. Maybe I didn't understand it fully because I was a kid. But man, like his career hits the skids. Like he's done. And then it's this movie that's kind of the rebirth of Rob Lowe. And part of that character he plays, Benjamin, who like one of the best lines is like Garth saying, if Benjamin were an ice cream flavor, he'd be pralines and dick, which is like a British. Anyways, it's hilarious. But like part of the thing about his character is that he's kind of making fun of himself. That Rob Lowe was seen as like a very smarmy young Hollywood kid who was using his looks to get by, and he makes fun of that himself. And it really relaunches Rob Lowe's career in a way, because then he's in Tommy Boy after this movie. And again, he gets to play the smarmy, like Rob Lowe before this was not smarm. He was not the smarmy guy. But in this movie and in Tommy Boy, he kind of makes fun of his image in a way where he is the smarmy, slick, I'm trying to fake you out kind of guy. And it just works. And then it leads into, the Rob Lowe we have now, which is great.
Yeah.
And in Parks and Rec. But this is really the start of it. There's some stuff we'll get to later where this is the start of a lot of things, this movie. But so Rob Lowe's trying to steal basically their show, steal Wayne's girlfriend who we meet. He becomes her girlfriend in the movie because Cassandra, played by Tia Carrere, who's like out of nowhere in this movie, she becomes a huge deal because one, she's super attractive. Two, she does all her own singing in this movie as like a heavy metal rock chick. So she's got the double whammy of being a heavy metal rock chick and being super hot. And so she's just an instant thing after this movie. She makes a pretty good career after this.
Yeah.
And it's because of this movie where they hired her as an unknown. Anyways, that's the whole conceit of the movie, is that Wayne's fighting to win his friend back because him and Garth have problems, and his girlfriend back, and try to beat the underhanded Benjamin, played by Rob Lowe.
Oh, Benjamin.
It's not an exotic plot. It's pretty simple.
Although it's funny, like you get introduced to all these like random side characters, and they all love Wayne.
Let's talk about his ex-girlfriend for a minute.
Stacy,
played wonderfully by Lara Flynn Boyle. Yeah, it's funny because I think most people have been there. Like whether you're a girl or a guy, you've had that ex person you dated who just held on a little too long when it was clearly over. And so Wayne has this in the form of Stacy, who they're kind of making fun of, but it results in this great scene in Stan Mikita's donut shop where she comes up to him and she gives him a gift for his birthday. She's wearing a Wayne necklace, and he unwraps it, and it's a gun rack. What am I going to do with a gun rack? I don't even own a gun, let alone miniguns that would necessitate an entire rack. My wife and I still quote that scene. It's a gun rack. And she says, Wayne, if you're not careful, you're going to lose me. He's like, I did lose you 4 weeks ago. Catch the net. Classic scene.
And like throughout the whole movie, she just keeps appearing, kind of like in Better Off Dead, the newspaper boy. Mm-hmm. Just constantly, like,
she keeps popping up.
Yeah.
She pops up. They're playing hockey. She's riding by on a bike. Hi, Wayne. Hi. And then like wrecks into a car badly. Like you see it the first time and you're like, oh.
She falls through the skyline.
The skylight.
Yeah.
She falls through, like she like died. But she lands on a couch behind their partied out friend.
Yeah.
At a rock show. So the side characters, you're absolutely right.
The police officer that they make pig jokes to.
Yeah, he talks about having to do cavity searches. One of the best side characters in the show is Al Bundy.
Yes.
That's not his real name, of course. It's Ed O'Neill. Mm-hmm. And he plays Glenn, the manager of Makita's donut shop.
I laughed anytime he opened his mouth.
So Penelope Spheris, who's the director of that movie, in like the 30th anniversary interview she did, said that he was so hilarious because during breaks in the filming, he never broke character. And he would just sit there and say psychotic things in the character of Glenn. And if you've seen the movie, you know, like the camera's they're always breaking the fourth wall. But the camera's usually on Wayne. And the moment we're introduced to the donut shop, the camera sticks on Glenn. And he's like, why is it when you kill a man in battle, they call it heroic? But when you kill a man in the heat of passion, they call it a murder. And Wayne jumps back and is like, hello. Oh, yeah. The camera we're the only ones that get to talk to the camera.
When the guy gets laid off from work and he then breaks down like, you probably want to kill him.
He's like, you know what I'd like to do? And Glenn's like, yeah, I know what you'd like to do. You'd like to go down there. And he's like, no, I thought about filing a grievance with the union. He's like, well, the world works in weird ways. Oh, so good. So good. A lot of the side characters in that movie. Of course, we mentioned Meatloaf cameos. Chris Farley.
I forgot Farley was in it.
Yeah, he's a security guard, and he gets to deliver some important information. Like it's totally benefiting the script later on. She talked about Penelope Spheris, the director, talked about Farley, and that was totally the idea of the head of Saturday Night Live, who was Lorne Michaels. And Lauren said, hey, I got this guy named Chris Farley you could use as this security guard character, but you got to be careful of him. He's very shy, and you're going to have to just be like kind with him because he doesn't like cameras. Like, so this is Chris Farley at the beginning, and like that shyness is part of the reason everyone loved Chris Farley. But like, I think, you know, he had an anxiety that we didn't even realize. Mm-hmm. That like reading the account of this 30th anniversary interview she did, the director, it was like, oh, wow. Like they had to get him used to being in front of a camera. And that was Lorne actually trying to get him practice. So Farley hadn't been on Saturday Night Live very long at all by the time he's in this little cameo piece in Wayne's World. But that was really interesting to me. Let's see. Obviously, he wins the day. There's several cameos in it. Alice Cooper playing himself.
But like knows everything about Milwaukee.
It's like, yeah, the whatever tribe referred to it as Milwaukee. That's played for laughs, which was a staple of the Wayne's World skits. So there was a Wayne's World skit where Aerosmith was on, and they start talking about like communism and like just busting it down with all these big words, and it's meant to be, and it is hilarious.
We're not worthy.
Robert Patrick playing his character from the Terminator movies, the T-1000, makes a cameo. Ione Skye is in it. She's the girl with Benjamin at the very beginning when he's first seeing the Wayne's World public access show. Meatloaf, who we mentioned. Brian Doyle Murray Bill Murray's
Yes.
brother is a big part of the movie. He's the owner of the arcade that is the sponsor of the new Wayne's World. Noah's Arcade.
The Flying Dutchman for our SpongeBob friends.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Old Man Withers is Blue from Old School. Yeah, there's just tons of little side characters that were wonderful in this movie. I already talked about the lack of alcohol and drugs, which I thought was great.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the subjects we do when we talk about movies on the podcast. Let's just get right into that. And let's just, Cody, give me your take on the movie. I'm really interested to hear your bottom line on the movie as someone who didn't hit you in your wheelhouse at a certain age. You had to go back and discover this.
So yeah, like growing up it was on, but if it was on, my dad would watch if nothing else was on. So it wasn't like a family favorite movie. Mm-hmm. And as I got older, like for some reason I would always miss when Wayne's World 1 would come on and I would see Wayne's World 2. So like I had combined the two movies.
Yeah, and Wayne's World 2 is not as good.
It's
missing that charm and it's just weirder.
Well, and they do like a lot of parody of the Doors in Wayne's World 2.
Yeah.
Which again, trippiness, but I really loved it. Especially rewatching it now. The scene that like I immediately just started cackling at was when he's going through his extensive collection of name tags and hair nets. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And again, there's so many iconic scenes that happen in the movie. Even when they recreate the Laverne and Shirley opening credits when they go to Milwaukee to see Alice Cooper. And they're like, oh, what are we doing?
There's so many wonderful little, like, I love that they understood that the appeal of Saturday Night Live and the appeal of Wayne's World is these sketches. And so that there's these little vignettes in the movie that fit in, but don't distract, but are funny. Like there's a little scene when Benjamin, one of my favorite scenes, when Benjamin's trying to tell them why they have to have Noah's arcade spot on the show because he's the sponsor, and it launches into this where Wayne's like he's eating this Pizza Hut pizza and he's showing the box. He's like, well, that's where I just disagree, that we don't have to do these things just for money. And Garth, what do you think? And Garth is sitting there for like head to toe in Reebok here. He's got like the hat and the headband. He's like, yeah, it's just like people only do things for money. That's just really sad. And so that was funny. It ends with like a Nuprin joke, which little yellow, different. And the commercials were all black and white with the pill in the hand being yellow. And so they even play that joke. So those kind of scenes are just amazing.
Oh, yeah. And another thing that really stood out to me, so when he finally starts talking with Cassandra and they start speaking Cantonese back and forth. And he makes a Kierkegaard reference. And I'm like, ooh, you are hitting my inner philosophy wheelhouse.
Was it Kierkegaard or was it Dick Van Patten?
Yeah. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like there's so many pop culture references in the movie, and then there's so many like highly intellectual references that are happening and are just played for laughs. And then the randomness, like when they're talking about Bugs Bunny in a dress.
Yeah, okay, so they're sitting, like one of the things they do for fun is to go out to near this airport, and they park their car and they sit on the hood and look up and wait for the plane to go over. And yeah, while they're waiting, they have this conversation. Hey, do you remember when Bugs Bunny would dress up as a girl bunny? Were you ever attracted to him when he dressed up as the girl bunny? And Wayne goes, no. And then they start laughing. It's no.
But then, like, the last takeaway I'll have is the song selection is like very random, especially when she's trying to win the contract with their last ditch effort and they play Ballroom Blitz. I'm like, is that the song you go with? Like, you're trying to impress a record executive and we go with the Ballroom Blitz.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, well, I loved the soundtrack.
Oh, the music's phenomenal.
I wore out that CD when I had it, listening to that soundtrack, and I loved it. So the music's great in it. And I love that she did all her own singing in that movie. Tia Carrera, who, again, was just some unknown. Part of the reason she got hired was she went in and they asked they wanted whoever to get the part to be an actress that could sing. They asked her to sing a Pat Benatar song, Hit Me With Your Best Shot. To which I would love to see the video of that if there was some, because I bet she was awesome.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they couldn't have picked a better person for that than Tia Carrera, who just killed it. I think, yeah, we mentioned all my favorite scenes too.
Oh, there was the Grey Poupon scene when they pull up to the guy that is in the fancy car.
Let's talk about the Bohemian Rhapsody scene for a second.
Classic.
Because the Bohemian Rhapsody scene is very interesting in that was a song that's, first of all, that's a classic moment that transcends the film. But you have to understand that song, Queen was kind of low in popularity at that point. So Queen had kind of disappeared. Freddie Mercury was sick and Queen stopped touring, and they just were kind of like a late 70s, early 80s thing at that point in everyone's memory. And actually, Mike Myers really fought for Bohemian Rhapsody being used in that scene because he did that as a with his group of friends as a high schooler. They would jam out to Bohemian Rhapsody. Lorne Michaels wanted them to switch to a Guns N' Roses song because Guns N' Roses was it at the time.
Way to stick to your guns, Michael.
Mike Myers wins out in this argument, and the rest is history, because when this movie comes out, Bohemian Rhapsody shoots back up to number 2 in the charts, higher than it had been when it came out originally. And Queen now enjoys this status as this great band, which they always should have been. But now they enjoy this status, and they owe a lot to this movie and this scene of Wayne and his friends jamming out to Bohemian Rhapsody. And I can remember playing this song at loud volumes and headbanging in cars, just like Wayne and the fellas. And like that scene is iconic, an iconic scene.
And it's been recreated in commercials and TV shows, and like, yeah, it has transcended its movie. Side
story, I once got in trouble as a youth pastor for listening to that song in the presence of my youth group. And some parents went to the pastor and told the pastor that it was a song about devil worship.
Oh.
And I had to go in and say, actually, no, it's not. It's a song about a guy who's committed a crime of passion. And he's literally wondering if he can be redeemed. Like, it's very David-like, King David-like. He's wondering if there's redemption for him, that he's done this terrible thing in the heat of passion. And it's literally the back and forth of the song is, imagine the angel and the devil on the shoulders. That's the song when it's going back and forth.
Yeah.
That's literally what's happening. And so when I explained that to the pastor, he was like, oh.
And it's like an opera.
Yeah, it's a very human struggle. It's a song about a human struggle. Can we be redeemed? Because in humanity, the answer should be no. But in God, the answer is always yes.
Nothing really matters.
Anyone can see. Nothing really matters. Yeah, great scene. Great scene. Has to be one of the favorites anytime you bring up this movie. Are there any scenes that could have been better? Was there anything cringy about it that doesn't hold up?
So watching it, I feel like you can't. So I had mixed feelings about if it could be remade again.
Mm-hmm.
Because at one moment there's they do the swing whenever there's an attractive lady, and there's some cat calling, and like that's a no these days. But then in the scene where he's speaking Cantonese, he's speaking Cantonese with Cassandra, and they're talking about Stacy, and he
refers to her as the psycho hose beast.
Yes, but like in one part he says, "I feel partially to blame for the way she is," and so like he's kind of addressing toxic masculinity in that scene.
Yeah,
and so I'm like, I don't know if you can fully remake this. I think like.
Oh man,
that catchphrase is gone.
What I love about the comedy in this movie is the innocence of it. Like even in that scene that you're talking about, he's taking responsibility for the way she's acting.
Yeah.
And in a funny way. You would need to, there would be updating that needs to happen. We've already talked about it. Like they would need to be YouTubers rather than public access guys. And some of the jokes we've talked about, like Nuprin, like nobody would get that.
The Grey Poupon joke, you had to been alive in the 80s or 90s to fully appreciate that.
And then probably the most problematic stuff is, they're rating women on their babitude.
Yeah.
Often. That was kind of a running joke on the Wayne's World skits, although less of it in the movie.
Although Babraham Lincoln.
He does use a bit of it to calm Garth down when he's getting agitated. He's like, okay, you're on a beach with Heather Locklear. And he's like, with Heather? And so it's used a little bit there, but mostly like, man, I feel like the comedy in this movie, this should be the movie we hold up when we say like last week's pod is comedy dead. This is what we can hold up and say no. Like you could still make this movie today. There'd be minor tweaks.
Yeah, it wouldn't be substantial.
But there's not a lot of like for this era, there's no like homophobic jokes.
No.
For this era, that's strange. Like, because in this era, I mean, that was played for laughs a lot, especially with a show about dudes. Mm-hmm. And dudes as close as Wayne and Garth. Like, that would have been played for laughs in other movies.
I don't know. You couldn't say that's totally mental, man, which they do say. Again, it's a minor tweak, but...
Yeah, minor tweak. I'm saying by and large, this movie is still funny without being cringy. I couldn't think of any scenes. Maybe the scene where they're making fun of like Cantonese. Mm-hmm. So like he says like a few words and then it just keeps rattling the subtitles and they look bored on the screen where they're kind of making fun of the language, I guess. Maybe somebody would be offended by that. But for the most part, I couldn't think of anything really cringy.
Like the end felt like maybe they didn't really have an end, and they're like, "Oh, let's throw out everything and see what sticks."
But I think that was the funny part of it.
Yeah,
though, is that there were no rules. It was just a fun movie. The We Got Spirit Award, which is usually the time where we talk about did this movie have biblical references or allusions or themes? Absolutely not. This movie is too empty to have anything that heavy, and it's supposed to be empty and fun. Although we've already discussed, I think there's some good moral things going on here. These guys have fun without alcohol, without drugs. Like the fun is through their togetherness.
Yeah. In this, like, there's not really a great betrayal or anything. Even when they're fighting, it was, well, Wayne walked out and Garth had to carry a show by himself.
Yeah, Wayne feels sorry for himself.
Yeah.
There's no, like, we usually do something called the Greatest Story Ever Told Award, which is did any of the characters in the movie follow a Jesus-like path or possess Jesus-like attributes?
I think in Wayne's World 2, you might be able to find those just because they do like this weird hippie Jim Morrison like storyline. But this one,
movie is not that deep.
No.
It's not that deep, and it's supposed to be not that deep. But I will reiterate again, just because it's not deep doesn't mean it doesn't have some great things in it that are good. And I keep coming back to it, but man, I don't know if we realized how abnormal for a movie to come out late 80s, early 90s about young party loving. I mean, literally the party on is the catchphrase. And there's just none. There's no drinking. And there's no drugs. Like Garth has a drink at the contract meeting, but even it's played for laughs. Like he spits something out into it. Like it's just there as a prop. So man, I really appreciate that these are young adults basically, and they're partying and having a good time, and it's not all about substances. So that was great. The winner of the movie. Now this was interesting. Who gives like is it we could say you could define this however you want. Who puts in the best performance? Although performance is a relative term here. I'll go ahead and go first.
Okay.
I think the winner of this movie is Saturday Night Live cast members, because this movie really. So this movie makes 100 and some million at the box office. It's a huge hit. It makes $183 million, cost $20 million to make. So it made $160 million. It's still got an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was kind of like universally beloved for a movie based on a skit show that's just kind of a goof. And it's still kind of beloved. And this movie really opens the door for the glut of Saturday Night Live cast member movies.
Oh, they made a Superstar movie.
They made a Superstar movie. They made Night at the Roxbury's. And it opens the door for them. So they get to, I mean, Will Ferrell probably isn't someone we know about if not for this movie. Adam Sandler. So Billy Madison. It really opens the door to make these movies for these cast members that are like super unique and aren't beholden to the same movie making process as other movies. So Billy Madison's very absurd. And it's Adam Sandler's style. Same with Happy Gilmore. Tommy Boy comes out and it's very Chris Farley. Like he's a man-child, but sweet, you know, like but those movies are highly successful cult classic movies.
Yeah. For me, I'm still going to go with Mike Myers.
Yeah.
As being the winner. Because
you can't argue with that.
Without that, I don't know if you get like the Austin Powers movies or anything else.
Well, this is Mike's first movie.
Yeah.
And this is followed closely by So I Married an Axe Murderer, which is kind of a cult favorite. Doesn't do as well as this one at the box office, but I know a lot of people that absolutely, it's like one of their favorite movies of all time. And then, of course, he goes on to do the Austin Powers movies, which he doesn't get to do if not for the success of Wayne's World. And it really has become one of our major like comedic stars of the last 30 years.
It is weird though that like between the two of them, I think Dana had a way better Saturday Night Live career. And like after he attempts to have a late night show, he disappears.
Well, it's interesting because they didn't get along very well in the making of this. There was apparently a feud between Dana Carvey and Mike Myers. And it was because on Saturday Night Live, Dana Carvey was just fine being this cardboard character of Garth, who was just kind of a sit-in character, not to be developed. But for the movie, Dana and Mike Myers had problems because Dana would bring up these suggestions to flesh out the character of Garth. Simple things like the licorice dispenser in the Mirthmobile, right?
Yeah.
That was Dana Carvey's idea, and he actually had to fight for it. Like Mike Myers didn't want that to happen. And Dana Carvey threatened to walk off the set and walk off the movie before they even started filming. And so he allowed in these scenes. And I would say that the character building moments for Garth in this movie are some of the sweetest parts of the movie that actually work. Like Garth is a great character. And it's probably because Dana fought so hard. And to be fair to Mike Myers, this is his first movie. And this is a character he'd already created by the time he got to Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
And it was all about Wayne Campbell. Garth is added on at Saturday Night Live at the behest of Lorne Michaels, because he felt like if he had a sidekick, it would be more interesting. And he was right. And Dana Carvey was right by like, hey, you should let us flesh out Garth's character because he's an awesome character. And he was right. And they all had to mesh together to make this perfect storm of a great movie in Wayne's World.
Yeah, I just feel bad for Dana Carvey.
Yeah. So there was a feud. So the feud goes back, it goes even farther. So apparently Dana and Mike Myers had a feud because Mike Myers famously impersonated Lorne Michaels as the character of Dr. Evil in Austin Powers. And apparently it was Dana Carvey's impersonation of Lorne Michaels that Mike Myers was using. Like there were certain things that he did maybe with the pinky and all of this that were Dana actually is the one who came up with this impersonation of Lorne Michaels, and Mike Myers apparently copied it. That's all alleged and inferred. But Dana Carvey's brilliant, apparently.
And, as far as impressions go, Dana Carvey's impressions are hilarious.
Yeah. When Mike Myers shows up to Saturday Night Live, Dana Carvey is the guy on that show. So he does the church lady, which was huge. He did the George Bush impersonation. Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it. Did it. It was just perfect. He was the guy.
Even his Ross Perot was hilarious.
I was partial to Grumpy Old Man. Like, in my day, we didn't have hair dryers. We had to go out in the middle of a tornado. And oh no, I got a chunk of wood lodged in my head, but we liked it. We loved it. Just perfect. He was so hilarious. Dana Carvey's brilliant. And he should have been bigger, quite frankly. And it must have been hard to watch Mike Myers blow up.
Yeah, because I forgot he made that Master of Disguise movie.
Yeah.
Oh, it was bad.
Yeah, it was bad. I love you, Mike Myers, but I'm Team Dana. Team Dana. But Mike Myers being the winner of this movie, yeah, for sure. For sure. I can't argue with that.
He got a lot of money post this movie.
Mm-hmm. The Go Get 'Em Next Time award. Is there anyone who was disappointing in this movie? I don't think so. I think everyone hits it.
Yeah. There's just a certain level of like tongue-in-cheekness, and like everyone seems to be in on the jokes, and yeah, I like it.
I think so. I was reading this interview with Penelope Spheris that she gave for the 30th anniversary of the movie. And she said she was talking maybe about the reason why the sequel doesn't quite work like the original. And she says it has she says, quote, "We had no idea when we were making this movie that it was going to be what it was." She said, "I'm absolutely astounded and amazed that it's survived these 30 years and is still in good favor." She says, "It's indescribably gratifying. It was a magical combination of cast and crew and a magical moment. There's really no other way to explain it." So there was a freedom. She goes on to explain there was this freedom when we were making it because nobody expected they were making anything that was going to survive. They thought they were making a movie about a dumb skit on Saturday Night Live. And so there was no pressure. They were just having fun. And I think that comes through in the movie, and that's why it works. And unfortunately, when they made Wayne's World 2, there still has those moments because these dudes are brilliant.
Yeah.
But it's just not quite as charming. And I think the charm is why it's good.
And like they're doing something like big scale because they have to go out to Colorado and like put on a concert. That's like the gist of the movie.
Yeah. And it doesn't make sense for the place they're at the end of the first one.
Yeah. It jumps the shark.
A bottom line question for this movie, and this has to be for you because this holds such a giant place in my heart that I can't be the one to answer is, does it hold up? Is this still, you're watching it basically for the first time really watching it? Like you'd seen
Adult
bits and pieces.
years.
Yeah. Is it still something you watch and go, man, that I was entertained?
I think if you are mid to older millennial and before that, it holds up really well.
Okay. For a certain time. And I would agree with that.
There's a lot of like in the moment references, and especially with the product placement stuff that like you had to be there. You have to know certain things. No one knows Alice Cooper these days.
Oh, my 14-year-old daughter, we watched a few of the skits from Saturday Night Live. She just didn't get it. She looked at me like with her mouth open wide, like, are you serious? It's like, you guys liked this? I'm like, well, you had to be there.
I kind of want to see what her reaction would be to when Chris Farley would do his interviews with famous people, and he'd be like, do you remember that one time? Like, that was totally great.
That was awesome. She has watched Tommy Boy with me, and she was entertained by Tommy Boy. But it's a different kind of comedy.
Yeah, and it's not
that transcends time.
Yeah, it's not based on like particular jokes landing based on the product or based on the period of time. And
Wayne's World hits just a particularly nostalgic place for me. Really in some of my formative comedic, like I was learning what kind of comedy was for me in my middle school years when Wayne's World was a popular skit. And just really dig it. And watching it again in the last couple days was pretty joyful for me.
Garth was like just his facial mannerisms. Like he didn't even have to speak. Like he just had like this really like positive smile look and like do something with his mouth, and you'd be like,
Team Dana. Dana Carvey. One day someone's going to write a book about like how he should have been much bigger than he was. He was always the sidekick, but dude's brilliant. But yeah. All right. Hey, tell us what you thought about Wayne's World. If you've gone back and rewatched it, or if we've inspired you to go back and rewatch it, tell us what you think. I got it on Amazon Prime for like $5. Bought it. Oh, $5.
I only rented it for like $2.99.
Yeah, it was like, so Amazon had it for $3.99 to rent or $4.99 to buy. I was like, I'm buying that. I'd buy that for an extra $1. That's a RoboCop line.
It is.
Anyways, also, we're going to Planet Comic-Con in Kansas City. When this pod drops, we'll be there. That Friday that this pod drops, we are going to be in Kansas City at what's the name of the place?
Bartle
Hall. Yeah, Bartle Hall. That's where the Comic-Con is at in Kansas City. Come find us. Come see us. If you come and you say, hey, I listen to the Pop Culture Pastor podcast, I love your podcast, then there may be a prize in it for you. We got lots of swag. So,
all the swag.
So come check us out. Also, if you could be so sweet as to subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review, give us a 5-star review. That would be great. Helps us out immensely. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We'll see you at Comic-Con or next week.
Yeah.
Bye.